everyone on our staff was very impressed with the shape that you were in when you came and visited us this summer, and they were speculating they are convinced you lift weights with your players. Do you lift weights with the players?
I mean, no. Good gosh, Dave, I would get crushed. What those guys are capable of today. I mean, if I get down and get me a few push-ups and maybe a chin or two, then I feel like I've sweated down and done for the day.
There you go. I like that.
There you go, Hembo. Hembo was convinced that you could out-squat many players on your team. That was Hembo's.
Hembo be wrong. Okay.
Let's talk about those other conferences. The Big 12, they might have some gripe with the selection committee. You've got Oklahoma State, who's now listed at number 8, even though they had a very convincing win over TCU. Baylor's at number 6. But, I mean, Chris, you originally had Oklahoma State in your top 4. Is the Big 12 in danger of getting left out of the playoff again?
They're in danger if everybody loses, okay? I think Oklahoma's already got a loss. They're the only team in the Big 12 right now that can get in with a loss. If Baylor loses, if Oklahoma State loses, then I think those teams are out, okay? Oklahoma, though, with the 3 games they have remaining, Baylor, TCU, Oklahoma State, if they win all 3 of those games, then I think they can certainly make a case. The good thing, though, for this league, Brad, is it's really like a round-robin tournament these next 3 weeks. The committee's been saying we want to see these teams play better competition. Well, they're going to see it these next 3 weeks, so we find out.
Yeah, I agree with Chris. If either Baylor or Oklahoma State goes undefeated, they're in the playoff. But if nobody survives this November round-robin by going 3-0, if they all lose a game at some point, that means Oklahoma has taken a second loss. And that means that either Baylor, Oklahoma State, or TCU will be your one-loss Big 12 champion, whoever wins that tiebreaker. I love that there actually is a tiebreaker this year. It's groundbreaking stuff. But anyway, if you start to look at one of those teams compared to other one-loss teams that would be in the conversation for the selection committee, teams like Alabama, Stanford, Notre Dame, the schedule strength for those 3 teams I just mentioned is so far ahead of the schedule strength for an Oklahoma State, a Baylor, or a TCU that the only way that you can make that up with the committee is for the eye test to say that you're a better team. And if you've lost one of your last 3 games, which is basically the scenario we're discussing here, I don't know how the eye test is going to win it for you. I think the committee looks at 2 things with schedule. One is what it is in reality. Another thing is what was your intent. And they look at Baylor different than they look at Ohio State, as I mentioned earlier, because Ohio State at least tried to schedule a challenging non-conference game. It didn't pan out. Virginia Tech is not very good. Baylor didn't try. And look, if you understand where Baylor's program was a few years ago, you get it. Like they're just trying to get bowl eligible. They never imagined that in 2015 they would be in a position to play for the national title. But the fact of the matter is still that they played nobody out of conference. And as it turns out, they've got 3 teams that are good in their conference. And if they win 2 and lose 1, that's what their resume is. They have 2 good wins and 1 good loss, and I don't know how that distinguishes you enough to make you a top 4 team.
Hi, I'm Kirk Herbstreit, and welcome to the Home Depot Game Plan Breakdown. What a great matchup in the Big 12 as we get Oklahoma on the road in Waco against the Baylor Bears. We've been talking about it all year with the Big 12. All the big matchups, all the games that you really wanted to see happen to be on the back end of their schedule. We saw a taste of it last week with Oklahoma State knocking off TCU in Stillwater, and this is the big treat this week, Oklahoma, as I said, and Baylor, and still many more games to come as this gauntlet of the Big 12 works itself out throughout November and into early December. Baylor cannot wait to see the Bears at home with this offensive firepower. And how about the freshman, Jarrett Stidham, walking in last week against Kansas State, looking as if he's been there his whole life, yet he's a true freshman. I think it says a lot about Art Briles and his system. A very balanced attack where they average over 300 yards rushing, over 350 passing, and explosive. So if you're Oklahoma, a defense led by Mike Stoops, a defense that has struggled mightily to slow down Baylor the last 2 years, they've got to figure out a scheme, come up with an attack on, do you overload the line of scrimmage and try to slow down Shock Linwood, or do you think about we don't want to give up the big pass play and try to take away the big vertical threat of Corey Coleman and company? So they're going to have their hands full. The one thing Oklahoma has, I think, they're in better shape this year than last year, is in offense with Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield's leadership, the intangibles that he brings to the tables will have to be on display if the Sooners want to go to Waco and try to pull off the upset against a very talented and explosive Baylor team.
I'm putting myself on the committee. You've already put him at 4, and as Mike, you said, the only time it matters is that last ranking. That's when Notre Dame could be pushed back. What if Notre Dame's coming off a road win at Stanford, 34-17? I'm not saying they're going to win, but what if they are? It'd be very, very difficult in my mind to see that brand, Notre Dame, move out of the top 4. I'm not saying it's fair or unfair. I'm just saying, based on the way things go, that would surprise me quite a bit.
I would love for you to be right. On the other side, I say if Baylor beats a number 8 or number 12 Oklahoma, then a number 8 Oklahoma State, then a number 15 TCU. Again, this is provided they all win as well as Baylor does, and doesn't get in, then we are effectively saying a Big 12 team is never going to get in the top 4.
No, we're not. What we're saying is if you continue to choose to play Lamar and SMU and whoever else you play, you're going to be penalized at the end of the year. That's what it's going to say. So if Oklahoma, who was willing to play Tennessee from the SEC in a non-conference, were put in that situation, my guess would be that the committee would recognize that, and as they're splitting fine hairs, they would probably say, hey, look at the willingness in the non-conference, something that is very, very important in the committee's eyes. Look at their willingness to go out and try to find somebody to play. And I think in Oklahoma's case, they would win that debate. But when you continue to thumb your nose with your schedule in the non-conference and play teams like Lamar and others that we haven't really heard of, and then you get into these kind of debates, then it's not a slam dunk foregone conclusion. Hey, we beat Oklahoma State, we beat Oklahoma, we beat TCU, we deserve to go. While that's an impressive resume, if you're comparing that to other teams that had a willingness to go out and take a chance and be tested and be challenged in the non-conference, you will lose that argument more often than not.
Skip, should Henry be the front runner?
Stephen A., I'm going to give a slight edge right now to the little big man from Baylor, Corey Coleman, putting up monster receiver yards for an undefeated team, would be the first receiver to win this award since our very own Desmond Howard back in 1991. Derrick Henry is right there. I think Ezekiel Elliott is making his case and is just a touch behind there and bringing up the rear, but coming on strongly is Christian McCaffrey from Stanford.
Skip Bayless, I'm going to go with the Heisman Watch experts. I think Derrick Henry is number 1. Obviously, Coleman can't be ignored. Ezekiel Elliott, I've been watching him, especially with the quarterback issues at Ohio State. He's definitely found a way to continue to do his thing. Yep. When I look at LSU, however, and the way we were talking about Leonard Fournette, how do we go from that to ignoring what happened when he went up against Derrick Henry? The defenses were considered comparable between Alabama and LSU. Leonard Fournette scores rushes for 31 yards, averaging 1.6 yards a carry. Derrick Henry, 210 yards, 38 carries, 5.5 yards a carry with Coke or Bateman as your quarterback. To me, there's nothing to talk about here. If Derrick Henry continues to do this, he's the Heisman winner.
I'm going to go with Stanford to win out. Now, I come from Big 12 country, Oklahoma City. I'm an Oklahoma fan. I'm sorry, I don't love the Big 12's chances here because even if Oklahoma State wins out, and the schedule was good to them this year because, as you point out, they got TCU, and, boy, they beat the heck out of TCU in Stillwater. Now they get Baylor in Stillwater, and they get Oklahoma in Stillwater. Way to go, Oklahoma State. But I just think the committee will look down this schedule and say, well, they won on a fluky late break at Texas, which they did. And then they'll say, well, they beat Kansas State by 2. They barely survived in overtime at West Virginia. They gave up 53 in a victory over Texas Tech, but giving up 53 points. Again, highly impressive. They were ahead 42-16 over TCU. But I'm just afraid, even if they win the last 2 games against Baylor and Oklahoma and are unbeaten, that Stanford will be given the edge off its strength of schedule and win against Notre Dame if, in fact, they win.
Skip, that's exactly where I was going. I got to ask you this question. How do you feel about the Pac-12 this year?
Not bad, pretty good, pretty deep.
The reason why I ask you that question is because outside of that one loss to Northwestern, Stanford has won 8 straight. Okay, so I'm looking at them at 8-1 right now. They're positioned at the number 7 spot All right? So you've got them ahead of Oklahoma State. Let's say both of them win out and they win all of their games.
Yep.
Who do we give the edge to? Because, again, Stanford, if they beat Notre Dame, then you know Notre Dame's going to fall out the top 4 spot. But I'm looking at their wins here. You beat USC 41-31 when they were ranked 6th in the nation.
Pretty good.
You beat UCLA 56-35 when they were ranked 18th in the nation. But now I'm looking at it, it's Washington at Washington State, Colorado. You beat all of those teams. Then now you've got Oregon, who's fallen off the map. You've got California.
I think they've lost 4 in a row.
That's right. And Notre Dame. So, again, you win Notre Dame. So I got to look at USC, UCLA, and Notre Dame. Does those 3 wins get them in over Oklahoma State? If Oklahoma State ends up running the table, does it enable them to leapfrog Baylor and Iowa? That's the question.
Okay, Iowa, I think, will lose in the Big Ten championship game to Ohio State. I'm projecting that.
I agree. I agree
so
with
that
that.
would eliminate Iowa from this discussion.
Okay.
And yet, I just think on the strength of a late win against a team highly regarded by the committee, Notre Dame, that will be more impressive than 3 home wins in Stillwater by Oklahoma State over the Big 3, if in fact they can pull this off, obviously, Baylor, Oklahoma, TCU. So, again, to me, on my eye test, the best team in the Big 12 to me is my Oklahoma Sooners team. But Bob Stoops, once again, did not have them ready for their arch-rival game against a Texas team that has proven not to be very good. And on the strength of that, you're out. And can Baylor win out? They've got Oklahoma this Saturday night, as you know, and then at Oklahoma State, at TCU, and Texas. I don't think Baylor can win out.
I think Baylor's losing one of those games.
I agree.
So I think that knocks them out. Iowa loses the Big Ten championship. It knocks them out, which means that we're talking about Stanford and Oklahoma State possibly leapfrogging, you know, over those teams and knocking Notre Dame out. Because we know if Notre Dame beats Stanford, they ain't moving from the top 4. Notre Dame will be in the mix. Okay, but I believe you. I agree with you. I think they will lose at Stanford. So it's Stanford and it's Oklahoma State. What happened to Michigan State?
Just a loss happened.
What's important, and that's the college football playoff rankings brought to you by Northwestern Mutual. Here are the top 10 as presented last night on the College Football Top 25 show. We do this every Tuesday night. We show these live. Clemson #1, Alabama, Ohio State. Those are your 2 and 3 teams. No surprise there. Really, the surprises started with Notre Dame at 4. Some thought, I think, that maybe Oklahoma State, with their big win over TCU, might slide into that 4 spot. Iowa at 5. You got to go down to Baylor still at 6. Oklahoma State comes in at 8. LSU with the loss to Alabama 9, and Utah rounding out the top 10. The top 3, Trevor, are obvious. I mean, Clemson, Ohio State, and Alabama in the top 3. It's really that number 4 spot. I mean, when you look at it, do the Irish control their own destiny now that they've gotten in with 1 loss? If they win out, is it theirs to lose?
They do not control their own destiny. As a matter of fact, right now, Notre Dame fans are excited